Hello everyone, welcome back to the Vegan Runner and a very wet and soggy Tarka trail for today's run, which is critical velocity, one of the many speed work sessions as part of the 80-20 plan. So, just about to finish my warm-up. We'll get on with today's first rep. Already looking forward to getting back to that fire and telling you all about it. There we go, critical velocity workout done. Go back to the fireplace now and talk you through critical velocity training, why it's good. But first, I've got to get up this delightful hill. It's about a mile long, so let's see at the top. Hello and welcome back to beside the fireplace. It's getting beautifully toasty here as I slowly recover from that 9-mile critical velocity workout, which had an average pace of a 7:30 minute mile. I'm running in the Adidas Ultra Boost 22, which I'm glad to say I'm enjoying again after sorting out the tongue with a heat gun. So this video is the first in a brand new series where I'll dive deeper into the 20 that makes up 80-20 training and give you a clearer insight into the 20% of higher intensity workouts, how they're structured, what they're focused on improving, some sample workouts so you can incorporate them into your training, as well as some tips and tricks that I've figured out through my experience of these workouts. You don't have to be using the 80-20 training method to incorporate the workouts into your training, but as an 8020endurance.com ambassador, look, I have a hat and everything, I fully recommend it. It's allowed me to run consistently and injury-free for almost 18 months, all whilst increasing the mileage and running a half marathon PB of 1:18 and my first ever marathon in 2 hours and 57 minutes. If you want to find out more about 80-20 training or try out a plan, check out the links in the description of this video. Right, let's get into it. Critical velocity, what is it? So, a critical velocity run is a workout that features longer than typical intervals at an intensity that sits somewhere between moderate and high. Now, depending on where you look and the coach who's giving you the plan, critical velocity tends to be a pace you could hold for around 30 to 40 minutes, or the low end of zone 4 if you're using the 80-20 zone calculator, or an effort that's somewhere between a 7 or an 8 out of 10. It's a pace that's slower than your 5k race pace, but faster than your 10k pace, unless you're Mo Farah, and it should feel more comfortable than you're probably used to if you're used to high intensity intervals. It's a kind of interval where you're ready for a break after completing a repetition, but not one where you have to really dig deep to get to the end of the interval. Tom Schwartz, a very successful elite running coach and the coach who first developed the training method, feels that critical velocity workouts improves the aerobic capacity of type 2A muscle fibers. These are the fast twitch muscle fibers that tend to fatigue first. So by improving the aerobic capacity of the muscle fiber, you're increasing the amount of oxygen the muscle fibers can convert before tiring, so essentially allowing you to run faster for longer, which for any endurance runner from 5k to the ultra marathon is pretty much just what we want. Alongside that major benefit, other reported improvements include an increase in a runner's average cruising speed and an increase in kicking distance. This is that kind of final push, that final sprint to the line at the end of a race. Basically, critical velocity workouts can allow you to start that sprint earlier than you normally would. Of course, it's not the only type of interval training you should be mixing into your running plan. This workout, like much of the others are most effective when integrated with a full range of different workouts. So that's why I'm making this video series. So if you haven't already, hit that like and subscribe button so you don't miss them. So I've been using critical velocity workouts in my training for almost 18 months now, and they tend to be one of my favourite sessions. They're not overly challenging, so from a psychological perspective, they don't take a lot of mental negotiation, and I like that the intervals are long enough and fast enough to be able to get in some decent mileage too. So for example, today's session saw me cruising for 4 minutes at critical velocity pace, and then, as is typical for this workout, I recovered for half the length of the interval, which is at a very gentle jog. You can even walk to start with to get the heart rate down if that's something you want to do and something you normally do. You can bring that heart rate right down and then start lightly jogging and prepare for the next interval. Today I was running on the Taka Trail, where I tend to do most of my training now, especially the speed work sessions. It used to be a rail line, but it's now been converted into a popular walking and cycling trail. Because it's a former rail line, it's relatively flat, or at least the gradients have been kind of smoothed out, so there aren't any particularly steep sections of uphill or downhill. But unless you're running on a track, you're probably going to want some way of measuring your effort rather than just relying on pace. For me, that tends to be relying quite heavily on heart rate to dictate the pace for these runs. So I wear a chest-based heart rate monitor, and I've performed a lactate threshold heart rate test, and you can see my video on how to do that here. And that is giving me my 80-20 heart rate zones for training. Now, no single metric is 100% reliable, and so I tend to use a blend of my intuition as well as pace to try and hit that sweet spot. So to give you an example, the first couple of reps, it can take your heart rate a little bit of time, maybe up to 2 minutes or longer, to reach the desired zone. That's because there's always a bit of a lag, a bit of a delay between how hard you're working and how hard your heart pumps and the amount of effort that you're putting into moving. So the temptation is always to go out a bit harder than optimal, and then let the heart rate get up to the desired zone and then back off. So what I like to do is have a rough idea of the pace that I think I should be targeting. So for critical velocity, that's slower than 5k race pace, but faster than 10k race pace. So having a kind of idea of what that might be in my head, and then try to hit that for the first couple of minutes until my heart rate has adjusted, and then dial it in from there, either easing off to adjust to the terrain or speeding up to get my heart rate in the correct zone. It does take a bit of practice, so don't be too frustrated if you're finding it difficult to dial in straight away. You could also use a power meter like the Stride FootPod to dial it in even further. Or if you don't have access to any of these tools, there's nothing wrong with using your intuition and running at an effort level of a 7 or an 8 for each interval. In some studies, a runner's intuition of effort is often very accurate, and it's a very accurate indicator of actual effort, so it's worth leaning into that, and with experience that'll come along too. And even with all the fancy gadgets that, something can run out of battery, it can glitch or, crash, and you know what technology is like. So building up that experience and kind of learning what those effort levels look like for you, I think works perfectly fine. Another little tip is to keep an eye on your recovery pace. So if you notice this is slowing down between intervals, then it's a pretty good indicator that you may be running the intervals a little bit too hard. So if you notice perhaps after the third rep that you're really having to slow down in that rest period, possibly even walking to get that heart rate back down to the recovery zone, then maybe you're running that interval a bit too hard, and just back off, just ease off for the next one, and then see what the rest period looks like after that next rep. As I say, it does take a bit of experience, a bit of practice to get used to, but over the course of time you'll get it dialed in. Now, before finishing up this video, I'd like to leave you with a few sample workouts. If you're interested in trying a critical velocity workout, this will at least give you a place to start from before adapting it to your running goals. So at the moment I'm training for the Brighton Marathon, so my critical velocity run looked like this today. A 15-minute warm-up in zone 1 and 2, followed by 6 4-minute critical velocity efforts with 2 minutes of rest in between each one before a final 15-minute cooldown. Now you don't have to always use time, you could also use distance to measure your interval length, so another workout you could try would be something like 10 to 15 minute warm-up again, then 5 to 7 1-kilometre intervals of a 200-metre recovery jog, and then cool down for 10 to 15 minutes. Finally, and for a slightly spicier version of this workout, you can try warming up for 10 to 15 minutes, then run 5 1-kilometre intervals with a 200-metre jog, then follow that up with 5 intervals of 200 metres and run these shorter intervals slightly faster, starting at kind of 5k pace and then progressively pick up the pace until the final interval. That one's going to get your legs burning for sure, trust me. Right, I really hope that's been useful to you. As I say, this is the first in a series of videos looking at the full scope of 80-20 workouts, diving a little bit into the science behind them and how you can benefit from incorporating them into your training. If there's a particular workout you'd like to see covered, or if you have any questions about the critical velocity workouts, then leave a comment for me down below and I'll be sure to get back to you as soon as I can. Thanks for watching, and until the next one, be the best you.